"You're too old to come with us to Belize. Just stay home and watch the house," said my daughter, dismissing me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. They jetted off to a tropical paradise with my in-laws, who were actually older than me, while I stayed behind in the house they'd already claimed as their inheritance. When they returned 2 weeks later, the house was gone, and so was I. They called me 67 times in desperation, but by then, I was sipping margaritas on the very same beach they thought I was too old to enjoy. But before we dive into this incredible story of justice served ice cold, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this channel for more stories like this one. The glossy travel brochures scattered across my mahogany coffee table looked like fragments of broken dreams. Each one promised crystal clear waters, pristine beaches, and memories that would last a lifetime. My daughter Cassandra spread them out like she was dealing cards, her perfectly manicured nails, paid for with money I'd lent her months ago, tracing the golden coastlines of Belize. "Look at this resort, Derek," she said to her husband, her voice bubbling with excitement. "The coral reef paradise, oceanfront suites, private beach access, world-class diving. It's absolutely perfect." Derek leaned over her shoulder, nodding with the enthusiasm of a man who'd never worked a day to afford such luxury. His parents, Harold and Patricia Williamson, sat comfortably on the couch I'd bought 20 years ago with my teaching salary, already discussing departure times and travel insurance as if this vacation was their divine right. I watched this scene unfold from my favorite armchair, the one Sarah had surprised me with for our 25th anniversary, feeling like a spectator in my own home. At 64, I'd spent the last 6 years providing free housing, meals, and financial support to my daughter's family, after Derek's business failures left them bankrupt. 6 years of watching them rebuild their lives on my foundation, only to be treated like furniture when it came time to enjoy the fruits of that sacrifice. "The snorkeling looks incredible," Patricia chimed in, adjusting her reading glasses to examine an underwater photograph. "Harold, remember how we always talked about seeing the reef before we got too old?" Harold nodded vigorously. "Been dreaming about this trip for 30 years. Can't believe the kids are finally making it happen." The kids. At 38, Cassandra hardly qualified as a kid, but her in-laws had a way of making everyone feel like they were doing the world a favor simply by existing. Harold was 66, 2 years older than me, and Patricia was 63. Yet somehow, in the twisted logic of this family dynamic, they were the perfect travel companions while I was relegated to house-sitting duties. "When do we leave?" I asked, reaching for one of the brochures. The room fell silent. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to barely concealed irritation. Cassandra's hand intercepted mine before I could touch the glossy paper, her grip gentle but firm. "Oh, Dad," she said with the patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "This trip really isn't suitable for someone your age." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked hard, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You know how these adventure trips can be," Derek jumped in, his voice carrying that fake sympathy I'd grown to despise. "Lots of walking, boat tours, snorkeling, hiking. Really strenuous stuff. We'd hate for you to overexert yourself." I stared at him in disbelief. This was the same man who got winded walking to the mailbox, who hadn't held a steady job in 3 years, who spent most of his days playing video games on the console I'd bought for my grandchildren. "I'm 64, not 94, I said evenly. "I walk 3 miles every morning, I volunteer at the community center twice a week, and I still referee youth basketball games on weekends. I think I can handle a vacation." Cassandra's laugh was musical but cold. "Dad, be realistic. When's the last time you traveled anywhere? You get nervous driving to the grocery store in downtown traffic." That was completely untrue, but I could see the others nodding in agreement. Somehow, in their minds, I'd become this fragile, incompetent old man who needed protection from the world's dangers, yet was somehow capable enough to maintain their house, cook their meals, and subsidize their lifestyle. "Besides," Harold added with a chuckle, "this is really more of a family bonding trip. You know, the four grandparents getting to know each other better, sharing stories about the kids when they were little. Four grandparents. The casual exclusion stung more than any direct insult could have. I have plenty of stories about Cassandra's childhood, I said quietly. Oh, I know you do, Dad. Cassandra's smile looked painted on. But this trip is about creating new memories, new experiences. And honestly, we think it would be better if you use this time to focus on adjusting to your changing needs. My changing needs? You know, accepting that you're not as young as you used to be. Maybe using this quiet time to think about your future, consider what kind of support you might need as you get older. The euphemisms hung in the air like smoke. Support, changing needs, future considerations. I'd been a high school mathematics teacher for 37 years before retiring. I knew how to read between the lines, how to solve for X when the equation was deliberately obscured. I think what Cassie means, Patricia said with false kindness, is that this is a good opportunity for some self-reflection. We all reach a point where we need to be honest about our limitations. Derek pulled out his phone, already moving on from the conversation. The flight leaves next Thursday morning. We'll be gone for 2 weeks. You'll have the whole house to yourself, Pops. Think of it as your own little vacation. A vacation from what? From providing free housing to ungrateful adults? From cooking dinners they barely acknowledged? From listening to Derek complain about the economy while he spent my electricity bill money on lottery tickets? I stood up slowly, my knees protesting in a way that seemed to validate their concerns about my age. I should probably prepare for my house-sitting duties then. You're such a good sport about this, Dad, Cassandra beamed. We really appreciate you looking after everything. It means we can relax and enjoy ourselves without worrying about the house. Without worrying about me, she meant. I walked toward the hallway, their voices following me as they dove back into vacation planning. Discussions of sunset dinners and helicopter tours, adventures I'd apparently aged out of overnight. The hardwood floors creaked under my feet, the same floors where Sarah and I had danced on our wedding anniversary just 8 years ago, before the cancer took her and left me navigating the strange new world of being a burden to my own child. Mom would have understood, I heard Cassandra say, as I paused at the bedroom doorway. She always worried about Dad getting too set in his ways, too stubborn to accept help when he needed it. Sarah had never said anything like that, not once. But apparently, my late wife's imaginary concerns were now being used to justify my exclusion from family joy. I closed the bedroom door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed Sarah and I had shared for 32 years. My reflection stared back from her antique vanity mirror, a man who'd somehow become invisible in his own home, too old for adventure but young enough to be useful. The evening light slanted through the window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor where Sarah's reading chair used to sit. In the distance, I could hear their laughter, animated discussions of all the experiences I wouldn't share, the memories I wouldn't make. For 6 years, I'd watched my daughter's family rebuild their lives in my house. 6 years of supporting them financially, emotionally, and practically while they got back on their feet. I'd assumed it was temporary, that gratitude would eventually replace entitlement, that family loyalty would be reciprocated. I'd been spectacularly wrong. 3 hours after their crushing dismissal, I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the same clothes from dinner. The house had settled into its evening rhythm, but voices drifted up from the living room below through the old heating vents. At first, their conversation seemed like distant background noise, the kind of family chatter I'd learned to tune out over the years. I'd planned to ignore them completely, maybe read one of the mystery novels Sarah had loved, or work on the crossword puzzle I'd started that morning. Then Derek's voice cut through the ambient sound, clearer and more distinct than it should have been. Honestly, I can't believe he bought that too-old excuse so easily. My book fell closed. Every muscle in my body tensed as if I'd been struck by lightning. Dad's always been gullible that way. Cassandra's voice floated up through the heating vent near my feet. Remember when we told him we'd pay him back for the roof repairs? Or the new furnace? Or that loan for Derek's business opportunity? Their laughter followed, casual, dismissive, cruel. I moved carefully toward the vent, my teacher's instincts kicking in. 37 years of classroom management had taught me when to listen and when to act. This was definitely a listening moment. The timing is actually perfect. Harold's voice joined the conspiracy. Right after we get back from Belize, we move him into that assisted living place we researched. My breath caught in my throat. Assisted living place? Sunset Gardens has an opening in 3 weeks, Patricia added, her tone as businesslike as if she were discussing restaurant reservations. They said they could hold the spot if we put down a deposit by Friday. How much? Derek asked. $5,000, Harold replied. But it's worth it to get him settled quickly. Plus, once he's there, this house becomes ours free and clear. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I gripped the windowsill so hard my knuckles went white against the painted wood. I already talked to that real estate agent, Jennifer Morrison, Cassandra continued, her voice animated with excitement. She thinks we can get at least $900,000 for this place, maybe more with the way the market's been going. Split 4 ways? Derek asked. Obviously, Cassandra replied. Mom and Dad Harold, you've earned your share dealing with his mood swings and complaints these past few years. Patricia's laugh was sharp and bitter. He has gotten rather demanding, hasn't he? Always wanting to be included in our conversations, expecting us to consider his opinions about everything. The entitlement is just exhausting. Entitlement. The word hit me like a slap across the face. I was entitled for wanting to be included in conversations in my own home. I was entitled for having opinions about decisions that affected my life. The best part, Derek said, and I could hear the grin in his voice, is that he'll never see it coming. We've got him completely convinced that we're just worried about his safety and well-being. Dad always was too trusting, Cassandra agreed. Mom used to say he never could read people's real motivations, another lie about Sarah. My wife had been one of the most perceptive people I'd ever known, and she'd loved me fiercely until the day she died. Well, she's not here to interfere now, Harold said callously. And frankly, this arrangement benefits everyone. He gets professional care with people his own age, and we get the financial security we've been working toward. Working toward? The only work Derek had done in 3 years was perfecting his Xbox skills. The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. I stood slowly, walked to the dresser, and opened the bottom drawer where I kept Sarah's jewelry box. Inside, beneath her wedding ring and the pearl necklace I'd given her for our anniversary, lay the deed to this house. The house I'd bought with my teaching salary. The house where Sarah and I had planned to grow old together. The house they were already dividing up like vultures. I looked at myself in Sarah's vanity mirror, but something fundamental had changed in those few minutes of eavesdropping. The man staring back at me no longer looked like a victim. His eyes held something I hadn't seen there in years. Cold, calculating anger. I closed the jewelry box quietly and sat back down on the bed's edge, their voices continuing to drift up through the vents. But now I wasn't listening as their victim. I was listening as their adversary, gathering intelligence, planning my response. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Derek's voice from 6 years ago, desperate and broken, begging for help. The call had come at nearly midnight on a rainy Tuesday in March 2018. David, I need help. I've lost everything. The story had tumbled out through sobs and panic. Online gambling, cryptocurrency investments that promised guaranteed returns, sports betting apps that had seemed like easy money. $73,000 in debt. The house in foreclosure. Cassandra 7 months pregnant with their second child, crying in the background. I thought I could make it back, he'd whispered. The Bitcoin was supposed to be foolproof. Everyone said it couldn't fail. I put everything into it, our savings, a second mortgage, even borrowed against Cassie's car. I'd listened with a breaking heart, remembering my own financial struggles as a young teacher, the nights Sarah and I had stayed up worried about bills and mortgage payments. We have nowhere to go. Derek had continued. Cassie's mom, well, you know she never approved of me. She's made it clear we're not welcome there, and my parents are barely getting by on their Social Security. He'd known exactly which emotional buttons to press. The grieving widower, the protective father, the generous grandfather. Sarah had only been gone 8 months and the house felt too empty, too quiet without her laughter filling the rooms. You can stay here, I'd said without hesitation, as long as you need to get back on your feet. As long as you need. 6 years later, they were more comfortable than ever, and I was the problem that needed to be eliminated. I rose from the bed and walked to the window that overlooked the backyard where my grandchildren played on the swing set I'd installed with my own hands. The metal frame gleamed in the moonlight, $400 from my pension check because Derek was between jobs and couldn't afford playground equipment. Their bicycles leaned against the garage wall, complete with the training wheels I'd bought and installed because Derek's bad back prevented him from doing physical work. The basketball hoop mounted above the garage door, another $200 so the kids could stay active while their parents recovered from their financial crisis. I started calculating expenses in my head, the way I used to balance budget equations for my students. 6 years of groceries for 6 people, conservatively $24,000. Utilities that had tripled with their arrival, another $8,000. The roof repair after the hurricane, the new water heater when theirs failed. Car maintenance for the vehicles they'd claimed as their own, medical bills when their insurance lapsed. Over $80,000. $80,000 invested in people who saw me as a burden to be disposed of. I pulled out the small notebook where I'd tracked household expenses since Sarah's death. Her suggestion, actually. You'll want to know where the money goes, honey. It helps with budgeting. Page after page documented Derek's requests, Cassandra's needs, the children's requirements, always urgent, always temporary, always accompanied by promises of repayment when things turn around. Things had never turned around. They'd simply learned to ask for more. The house creaked around me as it settled into late-night stillness. Tomorrow morning they'd wake up refreshed and excited, finalizing their vacation plans. They'd pack the suitcases I'd bought them for Christmas, drive to the airport in the car whose payments I'd helped make, board the plane with tickets funded by the inheritance they'd already claimed. Meanwhile, I'd stay behind like an obedient house-sitter, maintaining the property they'd decided belonged to them. But as I sat in the darkness, surrounded by photographs from my 37-year teaching career and Sarah's volunteer work certificates, something crystallized in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose, a lesson plan forming. They'd made a fundamental miscalculation. They'd confused kindness with weakness, generosity with stupidity. 40 years of teaching had required strategy, patience, and the ability to stay several steps ahead of students who thought they could outsmart the system. Some lessons were learned through guidance and encouragement. Others required consequences severe enough to prevent repetition. I closed the expense notebook and placed it back in the drawer, my movements deliberate and quiet. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new strategies, new ways to demonstrate that this old teacher still had a few lessons left to give. The most important lesson of all: never underestimate someone you've decided to betray. Dawn filtered through my kitchen blinds as I entered to find the family already buzzing with pre-travel energy. Cassandra stood at the counter like a military commander, organizing boarding passes and travel documents into perfect piles. Derek hunched over his phone, presumably checking flight status, while Harold and Patricia compared sunscreen brands with the intensity of scientists researching life-saving medications. "Morning, Dad," Cassandra called cheerfully without looking up from her paper fortress. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." I poured myself a cup, studying their animated faces with fresh perspective. Yesterday morning, I would have seen excited family members preparing for a well-deserved vacation. Today, I observed co-conspirators celebrating their successful manipulation, completely unaware that their victim had evolved overnight into something far more dangerous. "Flight leaves at 11:45, Derek announced, scrolling through his phone screen. We should leave by 9:30 to beat the morning traffic to Miami International. Did you remember to pack the underwater camera? Patricia asked Cassandra. Already in the carry-on bag, plus extra memory cards and backup batteries. Their efficiency was impressive. The same organizational skills they'd never applied to finding employment or contributing to household expenses. Apparently, planning luxury vacations required different talents than securing steady income. Is there anything special you need me to do while house-sitting? I asked, settling into my usual chair at the breakfast table. Cassandra finally glanced up, her expression radiating the kind of patience reserved for confused elderly relatives. Just the usual, Dad. Water the plants, bring in the mail, maybe have Mrs. Rodriguez next door check on you once or twice. Carmen Rodriguez, my 68-year-old neighbor who'd known Sarah and me for 12 years. Cassandra was suggesting she check on me as if I were an invalid requiring supervision. I'm perfectly capable of managing on my own, I replied mildly. Derek snorted without looking up from his phone. Sure thing, Pops. Just don't try to fix anything that breaks. Call a professional if there are problems. The irony was breathtaking. Derek, who'd lost his house to gambling debts and hadn't held steady employment in 3 years, was advising me about responsible home management. I sipped my coffee and nodded agreeably. Of course, I wouldn't want to cause any problems. My compliance seemed to satisfy them completely. They returned to their excited planning, discussing snorkeling excursions and romantic dinners as if I'd already vanished from existence. Harold folded a tourist map of Belize, tucking it into his shirt pocket. 2 weeks in paradise. We've definitely earned this. Earned through 6 years of free housing, meals, and financial support they'd never acknowledged, let alone reciprocated. The time will pass quickly, I assured them, watching Derek check his phone again. I might catch up on some reading, maybe organize a few things around the house. Cassandra's eyes lit up like I'd offered her a winning lottery ticket. That would be perfect, Dad. You could start with the basement. It's gotten so cluttered over the years. Cluttered with their belongings, naturally. Items they'd stored there when they moved in, then forgotten as my basement became their personal warehouse. Patricia began transferring documents from the counter to her designer purse, a birthday gift I'd funded. The resort confirmed our suite upgrade, ocean view, private balcony, concierge service included. Sounds absolutely wonderful, I managed, calculating the cost of such accommodations. Easily $6,000 for 2 weeks. Money they'd never earned but somehow commanded. Derek's phone chimed with what sounded like a notification. Uber's here. Time to load up. The announcement triggered immediate chaos. Suitcases materialized from various rooms. Last-minute items were grabbed from counters, and the general pandemonium replaced their earlier military precision. I stood back, observing their departure preparations with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying an alien species. Dad, you're absolutely sure you'll be okay alone? Cassandra asked, though her question sounded more like polite formality than genuine concern. Absolutely, I replied with complete honesty. I'm looking forward to the peace and quiet. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that once would have warmed my heart but now felt like a Judas betrayal. We'll call to check on you in a couple of days. Derek grabbed the heaviest suitcase, grunting with effort. Don't work too hard while we're gone, Pops. This is supposed to be your vacation too. My vacation from what? From subsidizing their comfortable lifestyle? From being treated like hired help in my own home? Within 15 minutes, car doors were slamming outside, engines were starting, and voices were calling final goodbyes. The front door closed with decisive finality, and suddenly I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by abandoned coffee cups and scattered travel brochures. For the first time in 6 years, the house belonged entirely to me again. I walked to the kitchen window and watched their taxi disappear around the corner, carrying my ungrateful family toward their stolen paradise. 2 weeks, 14 days to consider my options, evaluate my resources, and perhaps demonstrate that the burden they'd dismissed possessed capabilities they'd never suspected. I finished my coffee slowly, methodically planning my next move. The first call would be to Jennifer Morrison, the real estate agent Cassandra had mentioned during last night's overheard conversation. But not for the reason they expected. Some lessons required complete immersion to be properly understood. They were about to get a masterclass in consequences they'd never forget. By 10:30 a.m., I was dialing the number Cassandra had mentioned during their overheard conspiracy. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. Morrison Realty, Jennifer speaking. Ms. Morrison, this is David Thompson. I understand you've spoken with my daughter about potentially selling my house? A pause. Oh yes, Mr. Thompson. Cassandra mentioned you might be interested in listing the property. She said you were considering transitioning to a care facility? Care facility. The euphemism they'd used to disguise their betrayal. There's been a change of plans, I said smoothly. I've decided to sell immediately, but I'll be handling the transaction personally, I hope you understand. Of course, Jennifer replied, though I could hear confusion in her voice. Cassandra made it sound like this was still in the preliminary discussion phase. My circumstances have changed rapidly. I need to move quickly, within 2 weeks if possible. Her tone shifted to pure business mode. 2 weeks is extremely aggressive for real estate sales, Mr. Thompson. Most transactions take 30 to 60 days minimum. What's driving the urgency? I'd prepared for this question. Personal circumstances require immediate liquidity. I'm prepared to price the property competitively for a rapid sale. How competitively are we talking? Whatever it takes to close within 14 days. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, probably calculating commission possibilities. That timeline would require cash buyers, minimal contingencies, and significant price flexibility. Are you prepared for those conditions? Absolutely. When can you assess the property? I can be there in 2 hours if you're available. 2 hours. In 120 minutes, I'd take the first concrete step toward demonstrating exactly how dangerous it was to underestimate someone you'd decided to discard. I'll be waiting, I confirmed. After hanging up, I walked through my house with new eyes, seeing it not as the home where Sarah and I had built a life together, but as an asset to be liquidated, equity to be converted into the freedom to choose my own future. I retrieved the house deed from Sarah's jewelry box, along with property tax records, homeowner's insurance documents, and the mortgage satisfaction papers from when we'd paid off the loan 3 years early. Everything Jennifer would need to verify ownership and assess market value. At exactly 12:30, the doorbell rang. Jennifer Morrison appeared younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, wearing a sharp business suit despite the Florida heat. She carried a tablet and professional camera, prepared for immediate action. Mr. Thompson, she extended her hand with a firm grip. Thank you for calling. I have to say your timeline is ambitious but not impossible with the right approach. Come in, I'll show you everything. She stepped into the foyer, already making mental assessments. Beautiful original hardwood floors. Are these recently refinished? 3 years ago. Sarah, my late wife, insisted on maintaining the home's original character. Smart woman. Original features add significant value in today's market. Jennifer pulled out her tablet. Before we tour the property, let me explain what your timeline requires. 2 weeks means we need cash buyers, no inspection contingencies, and pricing that generates immediate interest. Are you mentally prepared for those requirements? I nodded. Speed matters more than maximum profit. Excellent. Then let's see what we're working with. For the next hour, Jennifer conducted the most thorough property assessment I'd ever witnessed. She measured rooms, photographed every angle, noted architectural details, tested faucets, examined electrical outlets, and evaluated the overall condition with professional precision. The house has excellent bones, she concluded, reviewing her notes in the living room. Updated kitchen, newer HVAC system, solid roof, established neighborhood. In a normal market timeline, I'd estimate $850,000 to $900,000. What about in my timeline? Jennifer's expression grew serious. For a guaranteed 2-week close, you're probably looking at $750,000 to $800,000. Cash buyers expect significant discounts for convenience and speed. I did quick calculations. Even at the lower estimate, I'd walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, while my family discovered what homelessness actually felt like. That's acceptable, I said. When can we start marketing? I can have listing photos uploaded and cash buyer networks contacted by tonight. But Mr. Thompson, I need to ask, does your family know about this decision? Cassandra seemed to think this was a longer-term consideration. My family is currently on vacation, I replied truthfully. They'll learn about my decision when they return. I hope you understand that family dynamics can be complicated. Jennifer nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd seen family real estate drama before. I'll start making calls immediately. You should have showing requests within 48 hours. After she left with a signed listing agreement, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the contract that would legally eliminate their assumed inheritance. Jennifer's business card lay beside the document, a small rectangle of cardstock that represented the beginning of their education and consequences. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the international format. Belize. Dad! Cassandra's voice bubbled through the speaker, bright with tropical enthusiasm. We made it safely. This place is absolutely incredible. I settled back in my chair, Jennifer's listing agreement still visible on the table. I'm so glad you arrived safely. How was the flight? Long, but totally worth it. Dad, you should see this resort. Private beaches, world-class spa, restaurants that would blow your mind. The concierge has already booked us a helicopter tour for tomorrow. That sounds amazing, I replied, tracing the edge of Jennifer's business card. I hope you take plenty of pictures. Oh, we will. Actually, that's why I'm calling. We wanted to check on you before we got too busy with activities. How thoughtful, checking on the house sitter before diving into luxury vacation mode. I'm managing perfectly well, I assured her. Actually, I've been quite productive today, taking care of some important business while you're away. Business? Dad, you're retired. What kind of business could you possibly? She caught herself, probably realizing how dismissive she sounded. I mean, that's nice, but don't wear yourself out with projects. Projects. If only she knew. Don't worry about me, I said calmly. I'm handling everything better than you might expect. In fact, I think you'll be absolutely amazed by what I accomplish while you're gone. Well, just be careful, okay? Don't try to fix anything that might be broken. Remember what Derek said about calling professionals. Derek's advice about calling professionals was particularly amusing, given that I'd already called the most important professional of all, the one who'd help me sell their inheritance out from under them. I'll be very careful, I promised. Enjoy every moment of your vacation. Make memories that'll last a lifetime. Because after next week, those memories would be all they'd have left of their comfortable parasitic existence. We'll call again in a couple of days to check on you, Cassandra said. I'll be here, I confirmed, though the definition of here was about to change dramatically. After hanging up, I walked through my house one more time, seeing it with the knowledge that each room would soon belong to strangers. The living room where Cassandra had announced my exclusion from their trip, the kitchen where I'd overheard their nursing home conspiracy, the bedroom where I'd processed their betrayal and chosen justice over martyrdom. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Jennifer would start fielding calls from cash buyers, arranging showings, negotiating offers. Within days, someone would make an acceptable bid, and I'd have the ultimate satisfaction of signing away their assumed future. Some lessons in respect and gratitude required dramatic demonstrations to be properly understood. They were about to receive the most expensive education of their lives. Sunday morning brought Jennifer's call at precisely 8:00 a.m., along with news that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Mr. Thompson, I've got remarkable developments. 3 different cash buyers want to view the property today. Word travels fast in investor circles when a quality property hits the market below typical price points. I set down my coffee cup, feeling a surge of anticipation. How quickly could they move if interested? That's the beautiful part. All 3 are specifically looking for immediate closings. One represents a corporate relocation company, another is an international investor, and the third runs a high-end rental property business. They all have capital ready to deploy. Perfect. Multiple bidders meant potential for competitive offers, even with my compressed timeline. When do they want to show? If you're available, I can schedule them for 10, noon, and 2 o'clock. That gives us time between appointments to discuss any immediate offers. 3 showings in one day. At this rate, I'd have a signed contract before my family finished their first week in paradise. Let's do it, I confirmed. The first buyer, Michael Chen, represented Pacific Relocation Services. He arrived in a black Mercedes wearing an expensive suit despite the Sunday timing, and conducted business with the efficiency of someone accustomed to rapid property acquisitions. Beautiful neighborhood, he observed, scanning the tree-lined street. Excellent schools, low crime statistics, strong resale potential. My clients are executives who value stability and quality. I led him through each room, highlighting the features Jennifer had identified as selling points. Updated kitchen, original hardwood floors, newer roof, established landscaping. Michael took notes on a tablet, occasionally photographing specific details. The condition is exceptional for a house this age, he commented in the master bedroom. Your maintenance standards are impressive. My late wife insisted on taking care of what we owned. Smart woman. Deferred maintenance destroys property values. He paused in Sarah's favorite corner where her reading chair used to sit. Mr. Thompson, can I ask what's driving your timeline? 2 weeks is unusually aggressive. I'd prepared several responses for this inevitable question. Personal circumstances require immediate liquidity. I'm relocating for family reasons. Family reasons. Technically accurate, though not in the way he'd assume. Michael nodded. I appreciate your directness. Let me be equally direct. If the property appraises as expected, I'm prepared to make an offer today. My clients pay premiums for certainty and speed. An offer today. Jennifer's strategy was working perfectly. We concluded the tour in 45 minutes. Michael shook my hand firmly at the front door. You'll hear from me within 2 hours, he promised. The second showing at noon brought Rebecca Martinez from International Property Holdings. She arrived with an assistant and a contractor, prepared for immediate property assessment. We specialize in residential investments for overseas clients, she explained, directing her team through a systematic evaluation. Our buyers appreciate quality American real estate as portfolio diversification. Rebecca's approach was more clinical than Michael's, focused entirely on numbers rather than personal comfort. She measured rooms, tested appliances, examined structural elements with professional detachment. The bones are solid, her contractor confirmed after inspecting the basement and attic. Minimal repair requirements, good electrical and plumbing, roof looks recent. What's your timeline flexibility? Rebecca asked as we returned to the living room. None, I replied honestly. 2 weeks maximum. Perfect. Our clients prefer rapid transactions to avoid market fluctuation risks. She made final notes on her clipboard. You'll have our offer by 6 o'clock tonight. 2 potential offers in one day. The mathematics teacher in me appreciated the elegant efficiency. The final showing at 2 p.m. brought the most interesting buyer yet. James Rodriguez represented himself and a small group of local investors who specialized in luxury rental properties. We focus on executive housing, he explained, examining the kitchen appliances with the eye of someone who understood what high-end tenants expected. Corporate relocations, visiting executives, professionals who want luxury, but not the commitment of ownership. James moved through the house differently than the previous buyers. Where Michael had focused on corporate client needs and Rebecca had calculated investment returns, James saw the property's potential for immediate revenue generation. This kitchen would rent for premium rates, he noted, running his hand along the granite countertops I'd installed 5 years ago. Executive clients pay extra for this level of finish quality. In the master bedroom, he opened closets, tested light switches, evaluated the ensuite bathroom with particular attention. Corporate housing clients are very demanding about details, he explained. They want hotel-quality amenities in a residential setting. This property delivers that experience. As we concluded the tour, James surprised me with his directness. Mr. Thompson, I'm prepared to make an offer right now. Cash, 2-week closing, no contingencies. Are you interested in hearing numbers? 3 potential offers in one day exceeded my most optimistic projections. I'm listening, I said. $775,000, cash, closing in 10 days. I kept my expression neutral despite the surge of satisfaction. More than Jennifer's conservative estimate, faster than my required timeline. I'll need to review all offers before making a decision, I replied professionally. James handed me his business card. Of course, but understand that my offer expires tomorrow at noon. The rental market moves fast and hesitation costs money. After he left, I sat in my living room, soon to be someone else's living room, contemplating the day's success. 3 serious buyers, 3 potential offers, all within my impossible timeline. At 4 p.m., Michael Chen called. Mr. Thompson, Pacific Relocation Services offers $760,000 cash, 14-day closing. We can have contracts ready tomorrow morning. 2 hours later, Rebecca Martinez followed up. International Property Holdings offers $750,000 cash with a guaranteed 10-day close. Our clients appreciate speed and certainty. 3 offers, ranging from $750,000 to $775,000, all meeting my timeline requirements. Jennifer's strategy had generated exactly the competitive environment needed to maximize value within my compressed schedule. I called Jennifer with the good news. Outstanding results, she said when I reported the day's offers. James Rodriguez's number is particularly strong. His reputation for smooth closings makes him attractive despite the premium. What's your recommendation? Rodriguez. The extra money is nice, but his track record for problem-free closings matters more with your timeline. Plus 10 days versus 14 gives you extra buffer time. Extra buffer time to be completely settled in my new life before my family returned from paradise to discover their inheritance had evaporated. Let's accept Rodriguez's offer. I'll call him tonight and have contracts prepared for tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I walked through my house one more time, knowing that within 10 days, these rooms would belong to James Rodriguez and his investment partners. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house my family had assumed was their inheritance would become rental property, generating income for strangers while they scrambled to find basic housing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown Belize number. Dad, having amazing time. Resort upgraded our suite again. Ocean view with private pool. Hope you're not too lonely. Love, Cassie. Not lonely at all, I typed back. Staying very busy with important projects. Enjoy every moment. Important projects indeed. Tomorrow I'd sign contracts that would eliminate their comfortable future in a single stroke of a pen. The mathematics of justice had rarely felt so satisfying. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I sat in Jennifer Morrison's conference room at 9 a.m. sharp, surrounded by legal documents that would transform my family's assumed future into their worst nightmare. Across from me, James Rodriguez reviewed the purchase agreement with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to rapid property acquisitions. Everything appears in order, Jennifer announced, arranging the contract pages in precise rows. Mr. Thompson, I'll need your signature on the purchase agreement, disclosure statements, and deed transfer authorization. The purchase agreement felt heavy in my hands, not from the paperweight, but from the magnitude of what it represented. With my signature, I'd eliminate the inheritance my family had already spent in their minds, the financial security they'd counted on, the comfortable lifestyle they'd assumed was guaranteed. The closing is scheduled for next Friday, James said, checking his calendar. My attorney has already begun title work, and the funds are ready for transfer. Next Friday, 3 days before Cassandra's family was scheduled to return from Belize. I picked up the pen Jennifer offered and paused for just a moment, considering the irreversible nature of what I was about to do. Once signed, there would be no returning to the old dynamic of gracious host and ungrateful guests. No more subsidizing their lifestyle, no more tolerating their disrespect, no more pretending their casual cruelty was acceptable. The pen touched paper. My signature flowed across the line in the same careful script I'd used to grade thousands of student papers over 37 years of teaching. "Congratulations," James said, extending his hand. "Rodriguez Properties is pleased to add this house to our portfolio." We shook hands, the retired mathematics teacher and the real estate investor, completing a transaction that would devastate 4 people currently enjoying tropical drinks in Central American paradise. "Commission payment," Jennifer noted, sliding her fee agreement across the table. "And Mr. Thompson, you'll have 7 days after closing to remove any remaining personal belongings. 7 days to pack up 40 years of accumulated memories and start fresh somewhere else." The timeline felt both generous and terrifyingly short. Jennifer gathered the signed documents, applying her notarial seal to each page. "This concludes the contract phase. Mr. Thompson, the property is now under agreement. James, your due diligence period begins immediately." "We'll skip the inspection," James confirmed. "The property condition exceeded expectations. We're moving straight to closing preparation." As I drove home from Jennifer's office, I felt the strange combination of liberation and loss that probably accompanied all major life transitions. The house I'd shared with Sarah, where I'd raised Cassandra, where 3 generations of memories lived in every room, would soon belong to strangers who'd converted into rental income. But those same rooms had also witnessed my family's transformation from grateful refugees to entitled parasites. They'd become the stage for casual cruelties and calculated betrayals that had taught me the difference between love and exploitation. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway. Unknown number, Belize area code. "Dad!" Derek's voice, slightly slurred, probably calling from the resort bar. "How's the house sitting going?" "Quite eventfully," I replied with complete honesty. "I've been taking care of some very important business while you're away." "Business? Come on, Pops, you're supposed to be relaxing. What kind of business could you possibly have?" The same dismissive tone that had characterized every conversation we'd had for 6 years. "The kind that'll change everything for all of us," I said mildly. "I think you'll find the results quite educational." Derek laughed, the sound carrying that familiar condescension. "Educational? Dad, you crack me up. Just don't wear yourself out with whatever little project you're working on." Little project. If only he knew he was talking to the man who'd just sold their assumed inheritance out from under them. "How's the vacation going?" I asked, changing subjects. "Incredible. We extended the trip another week. Found some last-minute deals on activities. Hope you don't mind the extra house-sitting time." An extra week. They were giving me even more time to savor their approaching disaster. "Take all the time you need," I encouraged. "I'm managing everything perfectly." "You're the best, Pops. Gotta run. We're heading to dinner at some 5-star place the concierge recommended. Probably cost more than you'd spend on groceries in a month." He hung up laughing, apparently amused by his own casual cruelty about my fixed income budget. The budget that had somehow stretched to cover their living expenses for 6 years. I sat in my car for several minutes, looking at the house that would belong to James Rodriguez in 4 days. Tomorrow I'd start the process of packing up my life, deciding which memories to keep and which to leave behind for the next owners. But first, I had one more call to make. "Sunshine Apartments," a cheerful voice answered. "This is Maria speaking." "Maria, this is David Thompson. I'm interested in your 1-bedroom unit that was advertised online." "Oh yes, the furnished apartment on Magnolia Street. Are you looking for short-term or long-term rental?" "Long-term. I'm recently widowed and looking to downsize significantly." "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Thompson. The unit is available for immediate occupancy. Would you like to schedule a viewing?" "Actually, if it's still available, I'd like to sign a lease today. I have excellent credit and can pay first month's rent plus security deposit immediately." Maria paused, probably surprised by such decisive action. "Well, that would certainly expedite the process. Can you come in this afternoon?" "I'll be there at 2 p.m. After securing my new apartment, I spent the afternoon walking through my house, deciding what to take with me and what to leave behind. Sarah's jewelry and photographs would come with me, of course. My teaching awards and certificates, a few pieces of furniture that held special meaning. Everything else. The expensive appliances Derek had used but never paid for. The furniture Cassandra had claimed as her own. The electronics and gadgets I'd purchased for their comfort would remain for the new owners or be disposed of as they saw fit. By evening, I'd created a comprehensive packing list and timeline. 4 days to dismantle 40 years of accumulated life and transform myself from homeowner to apartment dweller, from family patriarch to independent retiree. The phone rang again at 8 p.m. This time, Cassandra's voice carried the relaxed tone of someone who'd spent the day at a luxury spa. "Dad, just wanted to check in before we go to the casino tonight. Everything still going okay?" "Everything's going exactly according to plan," I replied truthfully. "How are you enjoying your extended vacation?" "It's been absolutely perfect. We decided to add a couple more excursions, zip lining tomorrow, then a cooking class with the resort chef. Derek's parents are having the time of their lives. I'm sure they were, spending money they'd never earned on experiences they'd never deserved. I'm so glad you're creating wonderful memories," I said. "They'll be precious to you in the coming months." "Coming months?" "Dad, you're being oddly philosophical tonight." If only she knew how philosophical I was being about justice, consequences, and the mathematics of retribution. "Just thinking about how quickly things can change," I said. "How the decisions we make today affect our tomorrows in ways we never expect." "Well, don't get too deep while we're gone," Cassandra laughed. "Save some of that wisdom for when we get back and can properly appreciate it." Oh, they'd appreciate it all right, just not in the way she imagined. "I'll save plenty," I promised. "Enjoy your casino night. I hope you win big." They'd already won big. 6 years of free housing, meals, and financial support. Now it was time for the house to collect its winnings. After hanging up, I sat in Sarah's favorite armchair, surrounded by the life we'd built together and the betrayal our daughter had crafted from our generosity. 4 more days until closing. 4 more days until their comfortable world collapsed into the reality of their own choices. Some lessons were worth whatever they cost to teach. This one would cost them everything. Tuesday morning, I began the most therapeutic project of my retirement, systematically removing every trace of my ungrateful family from the house they'd assumed was their inheritance. Working room by room, I started with Cassandra's bedroom. 6 years of accumulated belongings filled every surface like archaeological layers of entitlement. Designer clothes purchased with grocery money I'd provided, jewelry I'd given her for birthdays and holidays, photographs from vacations I'd funded but been excluded from attending. Each item went carefully into labeled boxes. I wasn't destroying anything. Despite their betrayal, these were still my grandchildren's parents, and someday the kids might want their family photos or personal mementos. But I was definitely relocating everything to storage where they'd have to work to retrieve it, treating this like the eviction notice you never got, I muttered, folding her expensive blouses with the same care I'd shown helping her pack for college 20 years ago. Derek's possessions told their own story of failure disguised as temporary setbacks. Gaming equipment worth thousands of dollars, cryptocurrency investment guides, sports betting apps on multiple devices, power tools he'd borrowed from me and never returned. I packed everything methodically, including the laptop where he'd probably researched the gambling strategies that destroyed his credit. The storage facility I'd chosen sat 15 minutes away, close enough for eventual access, far enough to feel like exile. The manager, a friendly woman named Rosa Martinez, helped me select a climate-controlled unit large enough for a family's complete household. "Moving can be overwhelming," she observed, watching me sign the rental agreement. "You seem remarkably organized about it." "I'm a retired teacher," I replied. Organization was essential for classroom management. Loading took most of the afternoon. The professional movers I'd hired, paid for with money from my pension rather than borrowed funds, treated everything respectfully, understanding that family belongings deserved careful handling regardless of circumstances. Watching box after box disappear into the storage unit felt like watching justice take physical form. Harold and Patricia's items required special attention, since they were essentially visitors who'd overstayed their welcome by 6 years. Medications, important documents, the expensive luggage they'd purchased for this extended vacation. I inventoried everything carefully, ensuring they'd find their possessions organized and accessible when they eventually discovered their new reality. "That's quite a collection," commented Miguel, one of the movers, as we secured the final load. "Big family?" "Was," I answered simply. By evening, I'd transformed the house into something I barely recognized, a clean, empty property ready for new owners. My own belongings remained, of course. Teaching certificates still hung on the walls. Sarah's photographs graced the mantel, and my books occupied their familiar shelves. But the house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if removing their possessions had also removed the weight of their ingratitude. The apartment I'd rented on Magnolia Street was modest but sufficient for my actual needs. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, living area large enough for my armchair and television. After 40 years of maintaining a 4-bedroom house, the simplicity felt liberating rather than restrictive. As I arranged my few clothes in the apartment's compact closet, I experienced something I hadn't felt in years: complete control over my environment. No one would eat my food without contributing to groceries. No one would run up utility bills while complaining about my thermostat preferences. No one would plan my future without consulting me. My phone rang as I unpacked my teaching awards. The caller ID showed a Belize number. "Dad?" Cassandra's voice sounded relaxed, probably calling from their resort balcony with cocktail in hand. "Just wanted to check in. How's everything at home?" I looked around my sparse but peaceful apartment, then at the house keys I'd surrendered to James Rodriguez in 2 days. "Everything's exactly where it should be," I said with complete honesty. "Good to hear. We're having such an incredible time. Tonight we're doing a sunset cruise with dinner included. Derek's parents are talking about maybe retiring here. They love it so much." "Retiring here? On what income?" Harold and Patricia lived on Social Security and a small pension. They couldn't afford to retire to Central America any more than Derek could afford to maintain steady employment. "Enjoy every moment," I encouraged. "Make sure you create memories to last a lifetime. Because after Friday, those memories would be all they'd have left of their comfortable, subsidized existence." "We will." "Oh, Dad, I hope you're not getting too lonely in that big house all by yourself." "Lonely?" I felt more content than I had in years. "I'm keeping quite busy," I assured her. "Actually, I've been more productive these past few days than I have in months. Just don't overdo it. Remember what Derek said about calling professionals if anything needs fixing." The irony was exquisite. Derek, who couldn't fix his own life, advising me about home maintenance. "I'll be very careful," I promised, meaning it in ways she couldn't imagine. After ending the call, I sat in my new kitchen, my kitchen, where no one would criticize my coffee choices or complain about my breakfast timing, and contemplated the elegant mathematics of the situation. They'd wanted me to disappear from their lives, to become conveniently invisible while they enjoyed the fruits of my generosity. Now they'd discover what real disappearance meant. No house, no financial support, no safety net to catch them when their fantasy lifestyle collapsed. Some lessons required complete immersion to be properly understood. They were about to get a masterclass in consequences that would make their previous financial disasters seem like minor inconveniences. 2 more days until closing. 2 more days until their assumptions became their nightmares. The mathematics of justice had never felt more satisfying. Friday morning arrived with cloudless skies and the kind of Florida sunshine that made everything seem possible. I sat in Attorney Richard Brennan's conference room at 10 a.m. sharp, surrounded by the documents that would legally cement my family's education and consequences. "This is certainly one of the fastest closings I've handled," Richard observed, organizing the paperwork with practiced efficiency. 10 days from contract to deed transfer is remarkable in today's market. Across from me, James Rodriguez reviewed the final settlement statement with the calm satisfaction of someone completing a profitable transaction. His attorney, Maria Santos, checked title documents and transfer papers with meticulous attention to detail. The property condition exceeded our expectations, James said, signing his portion of the documents. No surprises, no hidden issues, exactly as represented. Jennifer Morrison sat nearby, tablet in hand, looking pleased with her successful navigation of an impossible timeline. Everything's in order from the real estate perspective. We just need final signatures and fund transfers. Let's begin with the deed transfer, Richard announced, sliding the document across the table. Mr. Thompson, this officially transfers ownership of 847 Maple Street from you to Rodriguez Property Holdings. 847 Maple Street. The address where Sarah and I had planned to grow old together, where Cassandra had taken her first steps, where 3 generations of memories lived in every room. Now it would belong to investors who'd convert it into rental income for strangers. I signed my name with steady hands, each letter flowing across the page like a small act of liberation. Property disclosure statements next, Maria Santos continued, presenting additional forms. These confirm the condition of the house and any known material defects. Known defects. Did years of emotional exploitation count as structural damage? Did ingratitude affect the foundation's integrity? I initialed each page methodically, thinking about Derek's desperate phone call 6 years ago. The tears and promises that had convinced me to open my home and heart to people who'd ultimately see both as resources to be consumed. Financial settlement sheet, James said, sliding another document forward. Final purchase price minus closing costs, agent fees, and legal expenses. The numbers told their own story. $775,000 minus approximately $30,000 in various fees and costs. The net amount still represented more financial freedom than I'd possessed since Sarah's death. More importantly, it represented the complete elimination of my family's assumed inheritance and their comfortable parasitic lifestyle. Your signature here makes the sale legally final, Richard noted, pointing to the bottom line. I paused for just a moment, pen hovering above the paper. Once signed, there would be no reversal, no reconciliation that restored the old dynamic. Cassandra and Derek would return from Belize to find their assumed future had vanished into corporate ownership. The pen touched paper. My signature sealed their fate. Congratulations, James said, extending his hand. Rodriguez Properties is pleased to add this property to our residential portfolio. We shook hands, the retired teacher and the real estate investor, completing a transaction that would transform 4 people's lives in ways they couldn't imagine while sipping tropical drinks in paradise. Fund transfer is complete, Maria announced, checking her banking app. Mr. Thompson, the proceeds have been deposited to your designated account. I pulled out my own phone and confirmed the deposit. $745,000, more money than I'd ever seen in one place, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life without depending on anyone's generosity or tolerance. Property possession transfers immediately, Richard explained, gathering the signed documents. Mr. Thompson, you have until Sunday evening to remove any remaining personal belongings. Sunday evening. 2 days to complete my transition from homeowner to apartment dweller, from family patriarch to independent retiree. Key transfer, Jennifer noted, as I handed over the house keys to James. The weight of those keys, metaphorical and literal, lifted from my hands like a physical burden I'd carried for too long. As I drove away from the attorney's office, I felt the strange combination of completion and anticipation that probably accompanied all major life transformations. The hardest part was finished. Now came the entertaining part, waiting for my family to discover what I'd accomplished in their absence. My new apartment welcomed me with its modest simplicity. 1 bedroom, efficient kitchen, living space perfectly sized for a man learning to live independently again. After years of maintaining a house far too large for my actual needs, the smaller environment felt practical rather than limiting. I spent the afternoon arranging my few belongings with deliberate care. Sarah's photograph on the kitchen counter where I'd see it every morning, my teaching awards on the living room wall, books organized on shelves where I could find them easily, everything in its proper place, everything under my complete control. At 6 p.m. my phone rang. Belize area code. "Dad!" Derek's voice carried the relaxed tone of someone who'd spent 2 weeks in paradise. "We're at the airport, about to fly home. Can't wait to see you and hear about how you managed on your own." Oh, they'd hear about it all right. "I'm looking forward to seeing you too," I replied truthfully. "I have quite a few stories to share about my time alone." "Stories? Dad, what kind of stories could you possibly have from house sitting? The kind that would change their lives forever." "You'll find out soon enough," I said mildly. "How was your flight?" "Long but worth every minute." "Dad, this trip was exactly what we needed. We're already talking about maybe making it an annual tradition." "Annual tradition? Based on what income?" "That sounds wonderful," I encouraged. "I hope you took lots of pictures." "Hundreds. Cassie can't wait to show you the sunset shots from our final dinner. Cost a fortune, but totally worth it for the memories. A fortune they'd never earned, spent on memories they'd treasure once reality set in." "I'm sure they're beautiful." "What time does your flight land?" "We should be home by midnight. Don't wait up. We know you need your rest." My rest. At 64, I apparently needed early bedtimes but was capable of maintaining their house for 2 weeks. "I'll probably be asleep," I agreed. "But I'll see you in the morning. We'll have lots to discuss." "Sounds good, Pops. Thanks again for taking such good care of everything." I'd taken excellent care of everything, just not in the way they expected. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment kitchen, drinking coffee and contemplating the elegant timing of events. They were currently somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico, probably discussing what they'd do first when they got home, maybe planning how to approach the nursing home conversation they thought I knew nothing about. In a few hours, they'd discover that their assumed inheritance had become someone else's investment property. The house they'd counted on owning would belong to strangers who'd rent it to tenants who'd actually pay for the privilege. Their comfortable world was about to collapse into the harsh mathematics of consequence and accountability. Some lessons were worth whatever they cost to teach. This one had cost them everything they'd taken for granted. The countdown to revelation had officially ended. Now came the beautiful part, watching them learn that some burdens, when properly motivated, could carry far more weight than anyone imagined. Saturday morning, 6:47 a.m. My phone exploded with incoming calls. I was sitting in my apartment kitchen, enjoying coffee and watching sunrise through windows that belonged to a life entirely under my control, when the notification symphony began. Call after call, text after text, voicemail after voicemail, all from numbers I recognized but had no intention of answering. The first voicemail, left at 6:52 a.m., captured Cassandra's confusion and growing panic. "Dad, we just got to the house and there are strangers living here. They claim they own the property now and showed us some legal papers. This has to be some kind of mistake. Call me back immediately." I deleted it without a second thought and poured myself a second cup of coffee. The second message, Derek's voice, arrived 3 minutes later with barely contained rage. "David, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't funny. These people say they bought our house from you legally. That's impossible. You would never do something that insane. Call us back right now." Our house. Even in crisis, he couldn't acknowledge whose name had actually been on the deed. By 7:30 a.m., I'd received 14 calls and 9 voicemails. The progression told a beautiful story of dawning comprehension and growing desperation. Message 5, Cassandra again. "Dad, please answer your phone. We're standing outside our own house with all our luggage, and strangers are telling us we can't come in. We don't understand what's happening." Message 8, Patricia's trembling voice. "David, Harold and I are very confused. These people claim you sold the house while we were away. Please call us back and explain what's going on." Message 12, Derek, barely coherent with fury. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own family, to your grandchildren. How could you sell our home without telling us? We have nowhere to go. Their home, their family. The entitlement continued even in crisis. At 8 a.m., I received a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson, this is James Rodriguez. Your former tenants are at the property demanding entry. I've explained the legal situation, but they're becoming increasingly agitated. They claim you couldn't have sold without their permission. I may need to involve law enforcement if they don't leave peacefully." I responded immediately. "I apologize for the inconvenience. They were unaware of the sale. Please do what's necessary to protect your property rights." 20 minutes later, another text from James. "Police were called. Situation resolved peacefully. Your former tenants have retrieved their luggage and departed. They mentioned something about staying at a hotel until they can sort this mess out." Perfect. They were discovering what homelessness felt like. The same experience they'd planned for me with their nursing home scheme. At 9:15 a.m., Carmen Rodriguez called. My elderly neighbor's voice carried a mixture of concern and barely concealed amusement. "David, I hope you don't mind me calling, but there's quite a commotion at your old house this morning." "What kind of commotion, Carmen?" "Well, your daughter and her family returned from their vacation to find new people living there. Cassandra kept insisting it was all a mistake, that the house belonged to them. The new owners were very patient, showed them legal documents, explained they'd purchased the property legitimately." I sipped my coffee, enjoying every word. "How did they react to that information?" "Oh my word. Derek started yelling about lawyers and fraud charges until the new owners mentioned calling police. Then Cassandra began crying, asking where you'd gone, and why you'd do such a thing to your own family. The same family who'd planned to dispose of me in a nursing home without my consent. Did they ask you for my contact information?" "They did, but I told them exactly what you asked me to say, that you'd moved after selling the house and they'd need to contact you directly for any explanations." "Thank you, Carmen. I appreciate your discretion." "David, I have to ask, are you really in Belize?" I looked around my apartment, then at my phone showing 43 missed calls from various family members. "Actually, Carmen, I'm much closer than they think, but I'm not ready to talk to them yet." "I understand completely. After watching them treat you like their personal ATM for 6 years, I'm frankly impressed you stood up for yourself." Carmen understood what my own family had failed to grasp, that generosity had limits, and those limits had consequences when crossed. By noon, the voicemail count had reached 37 messages. I selected a few highlights from their growing desperation. Message 19, Harold. "David, please call us back. We're at a hotel now, but we can't afford to stay here long. We need to understand what happened and figure out what to do next." Message 24, Cassandra, sobbing. "Dad, I know you're angry about something, but this is crazy. You can't just sell our house without warning us. We live there. The kids' schools are there. Please call me back so we can fix this." Fix this. As if their betrayal was a simple misunderstanding that could be resolved with the right conversation. Message 31, Derek, desperate now. "Look, Pops, whatever we did wrong, we're sorry, okay? This is insane. You can't leave your own family homeless. We've got kids to think about. Just call us back and tell us how to make this right." Make it right. 6 years too late for that conversation. The final message, number 37, came from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Thompson, this is attorney Mitchell Foster. I represent your daughter Cassandra Williams regarding the recent property transaction. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss potential legal remedies." Legal remedies. They'd hired a lawyer to force me back into their comfortable arrangement. I saved that voicemail and deleted all the others. At 2 p.m., I made one phone call. "Foster Associates, Mitchell speaking." "Mr. Foster, this is David Thompson. I understand you represent my daughter regarding a property matter." "Mr. Thompson, thank you for calling. Yes, I've been retained by your daughter regarding what appears to be an unauthorized sale of property where she was residing. I'm curious about your legal theory, Mr. Foster. The property was titled solely in my name. I'm mentally competent, and I sold it to a legitimate buyer through a licensed real estate agent. Which part of that transaction was unauthorized?" A pause. Well, sir, the issue is that your family was residing in the property with what they believed was indefinite permission. Did they have a lease agreement? Any written documentation of tenancy rights? Another pause, longer this time. Not exactly, but there was an understanding. Mr. Foster, understandings don't create property rights. I owned the house, I sold the house, the transaction is complete. If your clients believed they had some legal claim to my property, they should have documented it properly. Mr. Thompson, surely you understand the moral implications. I understand that my daughter and her family planned to move me into a nursing home while selling my house for their own benefit. They arranged the nursing home deposit and contacted the same real estate agent they're now accusing of fraud. The only difference is that I acted on my plans before they could act on theirs. Silence. The sale is final, Mr. Foster. If your clients wish to discuss their future housing arrangements, they can contact me directly. Good day. I hung up feeling more satisfaction than I'd experienced in years. One phone call had eliminated their legal strategy and confirmed what I'd suspected. They had no actual claim to property I'd owned outright. Their only power had come from my willingness to be generous. Once I'd withdrawn that generosity, they had nothing but the consequences of their own choices. My phone immediately started ringing again, Cassandra's number. I let it go to voicemail and settled back in my comfortable chair to wait for the next phase of their education. They'd exhausted their legal options and their emotional manipulation tactics. Soon they'd have to face the mathematical reality of their situation. No house, no inheritance, no safety net. No one to blame but themselves. The lesson was progressing exactly as planned. 3 days after my family's return from paradise, I finally decided they'd learned enough humility to deserve a conversation. 58 missed calls, 23 voicemails, and one threatening letter from their attorney suggested they were ready to listen rather than demand. I arranged to meet them at Denny's on Colonial Drive, neutral territory where emotional outbursts would be constrained by public setting. The irony wasn't lost on me. A family restaurant for people who'd forgotten what family actually meant. They were already seated when I arrived at 2 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Cassandra looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days, her designer vacation clothes wrinkled, her perfect manicured nails chewed ragged. Derek slumped in the booth with the defeated posture of a man whose comfortable world had collapsed overnight. Harold and Patricia sat rigid with barely contained rage, probably furious that their extended vacation had ended in homelessness rather than triumphant inheritance celebration. Dad. Cassandra's voice cracked as I approached the table. Thank God you're here. We need to talk about this insane situation. I slid into the booth across from them, noting the dark circles under their eyes, the stress lines that hadn't existed 2 weeks ago. They looked exactly like people who'd just discovered what real consequences felt like. You wanted to meet, I said calmly. I'm listening. Derek leaned forward aggressively. Listening? Pops, you sold our house without telling us. We came home to find strangers living there. How is that even legal? It's legal because it was my house, I replied evenly. My name on the deed, my property to dispose of as I chose. But we live there. Cassandra's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. That's our home. The kids' schools are in that district. All our stuff. Your stuff is safely stored at Sunshine Storage on Orange Avenue, I interrupted. Unit 247. I've paid 6 months' rent in advance. You can retrieve everything whenever you're ready. Patricia's face flushed red. You can't just throw us out like garbage. We're family. Family. I let the word hang in the air like a question. Is that what you call people who plan to put you in a nursing home without your consent while selling your house for their own benefit? The color drained from Cassandra's face. What are you talking about? Sunset Gardens Assisted Living, $5,000 deposit, already arranged for 3 weeks after you returned from Belize. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes. Would you like me to quote your exact conversation? The timing worked out perfectly. Right after we get back from Hawaii, we put him in that nursing home we researched. Derek's mouth fell open. Harold and Patricia exchanged panicked glances. You were listening to a private conversation, Derek stammered. In my own house, through heating vents that carry sound perfectly. I kept my voice level and calm. The same house where you've lived rent-free for 6 years while planning my disposal. Dad, we never... Cassandra started. Dad's always been gullible. Remember when we told him we'd pay him back for the roof repairs? I continued reading from my notes. Your words, Cassandra, along with... The best part is he'll never see it coming. Tears started streaming down her face, but I wasn't finished. I already contacted that real estate agent, Jennifer Morrison. She thinks we can get at least $900,000, split 4 ways. I looked directly at Harold and Patricia. You two were quite excited about earning your share after dealing with my mood swings and complaints these past few years. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Other diners continued their conversations around us, oblivious to the family implosion happening in booth 17. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice barely a whisper. How long have you known? Since the night before you left for Belize. I heard everything through the heating vents. Your vacation plans, your nursing home arrangements, your real estate schemes, all of it. So you sold our house out of spite? Patricia accused, finally finding her voice. I sold my house out of self-preservation, I corrected. You wanted me gone from your lives? Congratulations. You got exactly what you planned, just on my timeline instead of yours. Cassandra was sobbing openly now. Dad, we were just worried about your future. You're getting older, and we thought... You thought you could manipulate me into signing away my independence while you claimed my assets. The only difference between your plan and mine is that I acted first. Harold tried a different approach. David, surely we can work something out. Maybe we can find a way to reverse. The sale is final, legal, irreversible. James Rodriguez owns the property now, and he's converting it to executive rental housing. Where are we supposed to live? Derek asked desperately. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket and placed it on the table. There's a list of apartment complexes that accept families with poor credit history. Most require first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit. I've included some temporary housing options as well. Derek opened the envelope with trembling hands, scanning the contents. These are cheap apartments in bad neighborhoods. They're apartments you can afford on your actual income, I replied. Welcome to the real world, Derek. The one where people pay for their housing instead of expecting others to provide it free. What about the kids? Cassandra pleaded. They'll have to change schools, leave their friends. The same way you planned for me to leave my home, my neighborhood, my independence when you arranged that nursing home. Patricia's anger finally exploded. You're a selfish, vindictive old man after everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Patricia? I asked calmly. Name one thing you've contributed to my household in 6 years. She sputtered, unable to answer. I've calculated my expenses, I continued, pulling out another sheet of paper. Groceries, utilities, maintenance, repairs, medical bills when your insurance lapsed, car payments when Derek's credit was destroyed. $83,400 over 6 years. I slid the itemized list across the table. Derek's face went white as he read the numbers. This is what generosity looks like when it's documented, I said. $83,000 invested in people who planned to dispose of me the moment it became convenient. We'll pay you back, Derek said weakly. With what money? You haven't held a job longer than 6 months and 3 years. I'll find work. You've been looking for work for 6 years, Derek. The only thing you've found is new ways to spend my money. Cassandra tried one last emotional manipulation. Dad, what would Mom think about this? She'd be heartbroken seeing family treat each other this way. The mention of Sarah hit exactly as she'd intended, but not in the way she'd hoped. Your mother would be proud of me for finally standing up to people who confused her kindness with weakness. I leaned forward. Sarah never said I was getting too stubborn or needed looking after. Those were lies you invented to justify your betrayal. But we're family, Harold started. No, I interrupted. Family doesn't plan to institutionalize someone for convenience. Family doesn't steal someone's inheritance while they're still alive. Family doesn't take advantage of generosity until it becomes entitlement. I stood up from the booth, looking down at their tear-stained, desperate faces. You wanted to know what happened to your house, your inheritance, your comfortable lifestyle. This is what happened. You forgot that respect and gratitude have to be earned, not assumed. You forgot that every relationship requires reciprocity, even family relationships. Where do we go from here? Derek asked quietly. You figure it out. The same way millions of other adults figure out how to support themselves and their families without exploiting elderly relatives. I placed a $20 bill on the table. This covers my coffee. You'll need to pay for your own meals from now on. Consider it practice for independence. As I walked toward the exit, Cassandra called out one final time. Dad, please, we'll do anything. Just give us another chance. I paused at the door and turned back. You had 6 years of chances, Cassandra. You used them all planning my disposal while living off my generosity. There are no more chances. So that's it? You're abandoning your own family? I'm not abandoning you, I said clearly. I'm letting you experience the independence you clearly wanted. Just like you were planning to let me experience the nursing home you'd chosen. I walked out of Denny's and into the Florida sunshine, leaving behind 4 people who were just beginning to understand the true cost of taking someone for granted. My phone started ringing before I'd reached my car. I turned it off and drove home to my apartment, where I could enjoy the peace and quiet they'd once claimed I needed. Some lessons were worth whatever they cost to teach. This one had cost them everything they'd assumed was guaranteed. The mathematics of consequence had never been more perfectly balanced. 2 weeks after the Denny's confrontation, I was sitting in the business class cabin of a Boeing 777, watching the Florida coastline disappear beneath us as we climbed toward cruising altitude. The destination displayed on the cabin monitor read, Belize City International, and I couldn't help but smile at the beautiful irony. The travel agent at Premier Vacations had been delighted to help me book the same resort, the same suite type, even some of the same excursions my family had enjoyed during their too strenuous for dad adventure. The difference was that I was paying with money from my house sale, rather than funds borrowed from someone else's generosity. First time to Belize? Asked the gentleman in the seat next to me, a distinguished-looking man about my age with silver hair and an expensive watch. Yes, I replied, accepting a champagne flute from the flight attendant. I've been planning this trip for quite a while. Wonderful country. I go twice a year. Business and pleasure. What brings you there? Celebrating my independence, I said, raising my glass in a small toast to myself. He chuckled and clinked his glass against mine. Independence is always worth celebrating. If only he knew. The flight passed pleasantly with good conversation, excellent meals, and the kind of personal service my family had assumed I was too old to appreciate. My seatmate, Robert Chen, no relation to the property investor, owned a successful import business and regaled me with stories about Belize's history, culture, and hidden gems that most tourists missed. The reef is spectacular, he said, as we began our descent into Belize City. Some of the best diving in the Caribbean. Are you a snorkeler? I used to be years ago, looking forward to getting back in the water. At our age, people assume we're past adventure, Robert observed. But I've found that retirement is when real adventures finally become possible. Our age. Robert appeared to be exactly my age, maybe a year older, yet no one had suggested he was too old for international travel or underwater exploration. The resort exceeded my expectations in every possible way. The Coral Paradise Resort sprawled along pristine beaches with manicured gardens, infinity pools, and the kind of luxury amenities my family had described in such detail during their planning sessions. My ocean view suite, booked with the too old for adventure money from my house sale, featured a private balcony overlooking turquoise waters, a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton linens, and a marble bathroom larger than most people's bedrooms. But the best part wasn't the luxury accommodations or the world-class service. The best part was checking my phone and seeing 17 missed calls from various family members, all pleading for assistance with their housing crisis. I deleted the voicemails without listening and ordered room service, lobster tail and champagne, because I was celebrating my newfound freedom to make decisions without considering anyone else's opinions about my age or capabilities. The next morning brought my first snorkeling excursion in over 15 years. The boat captain, a weathered Belizean named Marcus, helped me adjust my equipment with the patient professionalism of someone who'd worked with older tourists for decades. "First time back in the water in a while?" he asked, noting my slight nervousness. 15 years, I admitted. My family thought I was too old for this kind of activity. Marcus laughed, a rich sound that carried across the water. "Man, I got clients in their 80s who dive better than tourists half their age. It's not about the number of years. It's about the spirit inside." The spirit inside. Sarah would have loved that phrase. When I slipped into the crystal-clear Caribbean waters above the reef, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Schools of tropical fish swirled around me in living rainbows. Coral formations stretched in every direction like underwater cities. Sea turtles glided past with ancient grace, completely indifferent to my age or supposed limitations. I spent 2 hours exploring the reef, taking underwater photographs with the camera I'd rented, marveling at the beauty my family had assumed I was too old to appreciate. When I finally climbed back onto the boat, I felt more alive than I had since Sarah's death. "How was it?" Marcus asked, helping me remove my fins. "Absolutely incredible. I'd forgotten how much I loved this. The reef doesn't care how old you are," he said with a grin. "It just wants you to appreciate its beauty." That evening, I joined Robert Chen for dinner at the resort's 5-star restaurant. He'd extended the invitation during our flight, and I'd accepted, looking forward to conversation with someone who didn't see my age as a disability. "You look remarkably relaxed for someone on their first day," Robert observed over appetizers of conch fritters and local beer. "I feel like I've rediscovered something I thought I'd lost," I said honestly. "My family convinced me that adventure was behind me, that I should focus on accepting my limitations." Robert's expression hardened slightly. "Family can be the cruelest critics sometimes. They see us aging and assume we're diminishing, when really we're just changing." Exactly. They were so worried about my safety and well-being that they forgot to consider my happiness and autonomy. "Where are they now?" Robert asked carefully, probably sensing family drama. "Discovering what independence means when you actually have to earn it," I replied, raising my beer glass, learning valuable lessons about consequences and personal responsibility. We spent the evening discussing travel, business, philosophy, and the strange freedom that came with reaching an age where other people's opinions mattered less than personal satisfaction. Robert shared stories about his late wife, his grown children who lived their own lives without depending on his support, his adventures in semi-retirement. "The best part about this stage of life," he said over dessert, "is that we can finally please ourselves without feeling guilty about it." Please ourselves. For 6 years, I'd structured my life around pleasing ungrateful family members who saw my efforts as obligations rather than gifts. My phone buzzed with another call from Cassandra. I glanced at the screen and turned the phone face down without answering. "Important call?" Robert asked. "Not anymore," I replied. The next few days passed in a blur of activities my family had deemed too strenuous for someone my age. Zip-lining through jungle canopies, hiking to ancient Mayan ruins, helicopter tours over pristine rainforest, sunset sailing with gourmet dinners prepared by world-class chefs. Each adventure reinforced the same lesson. The only limitations were the ones I accepted. My age was just a number, not a disqualification from joy, discovery, or new experiences. On my final evening in Belize, I sat on my private balcony, watching the sunset paint the Caribbean in shades of gold and crimson. My phone showed 41 missed calls and 23 unheard voicemails from my family, but I felt no urgency to respond. They were learning what it meant to solve their own problems, to create their own security, to take responsibility for their own choices. The lessons were undoubtedly difficult, but education always required some discomfort to be effective. I opened my laptop and began typing an email I'd been composing mentally for days. Dear Cassandra, Derek, Harold, and Patricia, and by the time you read this, I'll be returning from an incredible week in Belize, the same resort where you celebrated my exclusion from family adventures. The snorkeling was spectacular. The helicopter tour was breathtaking. The 5-star dining was exquisite. All the experiences you declared too strenuous for someone my age were, in fact, perfectly suited to my capabilities and interests. I wanted you to know that I've decided to make travel a priority in my retirement. I've booked trips to Costa Rica next month, followed by European river cruises in the spring. Amazing what's possible when you're not subsidizing other adults' lifestyle choices. I hope you're adjusting well to independence. I'm sure you're discovering the same joy and self-sufficiency that I'm finding in my newfound freedom. I'll be in touch when I'm ready for contact. Until then, enjoy your education and personal responsibility. With complex feelings, Dad, David. I scheduled the email to send automatically when my plane landed in Miami, then closed the laptop and returned to watching the sunset. Tomorrow I'd fly home to my comfortable apartment, my peaceful routine, my life structured around choices I made for myself rather than obligations imposed by others. Some lessons were expensive to teach, but the results were priceless. They'd wanted me out of their comfortable arrangement. Mission accomplished. Now they could discover what comfort actually cost when you had to earn it yourself. The mathematics of justice had never felt more perfectly balanced. 3 months after my Belize adventure, I was living a life I hadn't imagined possible during my years as an unpaid hotel manager for ungrateful relatives. My apartment had transformed from temporary refuge into a comfortable haven where every decision was mine to make. The morning routine I'd developed felt luxurious in its simplicity. Coffee at my own preferred strength, breakfast at whatever time I chose, newspapers read without interruption from people demanding attention they'd never earned. At 64, I was discovering the revolutionary concept of pleasing myself without consulting a committee of beneficiaries. My phone still received occasional calls from various family members, but the frequency had decreased dramatically. 41 calls the first week had diminished to maybe 3 or 4 per week, and even those I usually ignored. The voicemails had evolved from outrage to pleading to desperate bargaining to what sounded like grudging acceptance of their new reality. I'd listened to a few of the more recent messages primarily to monitor their adjustment progress. Cassandra, 2 weeks ago. Dad, we found a 2-bedroom apartment in Altamonte Springs. It's not much, but the kids are adjusting to their new school. Derek finally got a job at a warehouse, night shift, but it's steady work. We're learning to budget without the help we're used to. I hope you're doing well, wherever you are. Derek, last week. Pops, I know you're probably still angry, but I wanted you to know I'm working 2 jobs now. Warehouse at night, retail during the day. It's exhausting, but we're managing. The kids miss their grandfather, even if their grandfather doesn't miss them. The guilt manipulation in that last line almost impressed me with its sophistication. Harold, 3 days ago. David, Patricia, and I are staying at an extended stay hotel for now. Our Social Security covers the rent, but just barely. We're looking into senior housing options that we can actually afford. We understand now that we took advantage of your generosity. We're sorry. Too little, too late. But at least they were learning. My own life had flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The Costa Rica trip had been spectacular. Ziplining through cloud forests, wildlife photography, volcano hiking, that would have horrified my family's assessment of my physical capabilities. Next month brought the European river cruise, followed by a photography workshop in the Canadian Rockies. But the best part wasn't the travel. The best part was the complete absence of anyone telling me what I was too old to do, too fragile to attempt, or too set in my ways to enjoy. On this particular Thursday morning, I was planning my next adventure when an unexpected knock interrupted my research into African safari options. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the apartment complex had secure entry, so visitors had to be buzzed in. Through the peephole, I saw a small face I recognized, but hadn't seen in months. Grandpa David? My heart clenched. Emma, Cassandra's 8-year-old daughter, stood in the hallway wearing a school uniform I didn't recognize and holding what appeared to be a handmade card. I opened the door carefully, looking past her for adult supervision. Emma, sweetheart, what are you doing here? Where are your parents? Mom's in the car downstairs, she said quietly. She said I could come up and give you this. She held out the construction paper card with careful formality. I made it at school for Grandparents' Day. The card featured crayon drawings of what appeared to be a man and a little girl holding hands, with "I miss you, Grandpa," written in careful 8-year-old handwriting. I accepted the card, feeling emotions I'd successfully suppressed for months. That's very thoughtful, Emma. How are you doing in your new school? It's okay, I guess. Different from my old one. I don't know many kids yet. She paused, studying my face with the directness only children could manage. Mom cries sometimes at night. She says it's because she misses you and feels bad about something that happened. From the mouths of babes. The adults who'd planned my disposal had kept their 8-year-old granddaughter ignorant of their schemes. Are you taking care of your little brother? I asked, deflecting from more complex topics. Yeah. Jason doesn't understand why we moved or why you don't come to dinner anymore. He keeps asking when you're coming back. The knife twisted a little deeper. Jason was 5. Too young to understand family betrayal. Too young to grasp the concept of consequences for actions he hadn't taken. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Are you here because your mom sent you up to talk to me, or because you wanted to see me yourself? She considered the question with 8-year-old seriousness. Both, I think. Mom said I could give you the card if I wanted to, but she didn't make me. I wanted to see if you were okay because Dad said you were probably lonely and sad. Dad said I was lonely and sad. Even in this innocent interaction, Derek was planting seeds of emotional manipulation. I'm not lonely or sad, Emma. I'm actually quite happy. I've been traveling to beautiful places, meeting new friends, doing things I've always wanted to do. Like what? Well, last month I went swimming with tropical fish in a place called Belize. Next month I'm going on a big boat that travels down rivers in Europe. Her eyes widened with the excitement only children could muster for adventure stories. That sounds amazing. Can I see pictures? I hesitated. Inviting her inside felt like opening a door I'd deliberately closed. But she was 8 years old, innocent of her parents' manipulations and genuinely excited to hear about her grandfather's adventures. Come in for just a few minutes, I said, stepping aside. But then you need to go back to your mom. My apartment looked different through a child's eyes. Emma examined everything with curiosity. The travel photographs on my walls, the stack of brochures for upcoming trips, the comfortable furniture chosen for my preferences rather than family gatherings. This is nice, Grandpa, she said, settling into my reading chair. It's like a grown-up apartment. It is a grown-up apartment, I agreed, showing her photos from Belize on my tablet. These are the fish I swam with. She oohed and awed over the underwater photography, asked questions about coral reefs and sea turtles, listened with rapt attention to stories about helicopter tours and jungle hikes. You're not too old for adventures, she observed with childlike logic. You're just old enough to have better adventures. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. After 15 minutes, I knew I had to send her back before our visit became a tool for renewed manipulation. Emma, I need you to go back to your mom now. Okay. She hugged me briefly, a spontaneous gesture that nearly broke my resolve. Grandpa, will I see you again sometime? The question I'd been dreading. I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on a lot of grown-up things that are complicated. Mom said she made some mistakes and feels really bad about them. Your mom did make mistakes. Big ones. But that's between her and me to figure out. I hope you figure it out soon, Emma said with 8-year-old optimism. I miss our Saturday pancakes. Saturday pancakes. For 5 years, I'd made elaborate weekend breakfasts for my grandchildren while their parents slept late, recovering from whatever entertainment they'd found the night before. I walked Emma to the apartment complex entrance, where I could see Cassandra waiting in an older model Honda Civic, probably the most affordable car she could find with her destroyed credit. Cassandra looked up as we approached, her face showing a mixture of hope, fear, and exhaustion. 3 months of actual adult responsibility had aged her visibly. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by practical discount store attire. The perfect manicure had given way to short, unpolished nails. The confidence that came from never worrying about money had been replaced by the stress lines that accompanied real budgeting. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly through the rolled-down window. "Cassandra, thank you for letting her visit. I know you didn't have to." "She's innocent of your mistakes," I replied evenly. "Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' poor choices." Cassandra flinched at the direct hit. "I know you're angry." "I'm not angry anymore," I interrupted. "Anger is an active emotion, and I'm not actively thinking about you enough to sustain it." That seemed to hurt more than rage would have. "Dad, is there any chance we could talk sometime? Not about money or help, just talk." I studied her face, noting the genuine exhaustion and what appeared to be authentic remorse. 3 months of supporting herself had taught lessons that 6 years of free housing hadn't managed to convey. "Maybe," I said finally, "when I'm ready." "How will I know when you're ready?" "You won't. I'll let you know." Emma climbed into the back seat, waving goodbye through the window. As they drove away, I found myself standing on the sidewalk for several minutes, processing emotions I'd successfully avoided for months. The grandchildren were innocent victims of their parents' choices. That truth had always complicated my feelings about the justice I'd administered. Emma and Jason hadn't planned my nursing home disposal or stolen my inheritance. They'd simply been collateral damage in a war their parents had started. But acknowledging their innocence didn't change the fundamental equation. Actions had consequences. Betrayal required accountability. Generosity, once withdrawn, couldn't be restored through child-mediated guilt manipulation. I returned to my apartment and placed Emma's card on my refrigerator, not as a step toward reconciliation, but as a reminder that some relationships were worth preserving, even when others had to be permanently severed. The European river cruise was still 3 weeks away. I had plenty of time to process complicated feelings before my next adventure in independence. Some lessons were harder to teach when innocent parties suffered collateral damage. But the alternative, returning to exploitation disguised as family obligation, would ultimately harm those same innocent parties even more. The mathematics of justice sometimes included variables that made the equations more complex, but no less accurate. 1 year later, I was sitting in a sidewalk cafe in Prague, working on the memoir I'd decided to write about my transformation from victim to victor. The European river cruise had become a month-long adventure through 5 countries, followed by a photography expedition to New Zealand, and now this extended stay in Central Europe, where I was documenting my journey from exploitation to independence. My phone buzzed with a notification, email from an address I recognized, cassandra.williams2024@gmail.com. The subject line read, 1 year later, no expectations. I hesitated before opening it. A year of silence had allowed wounds to heal and perspectives to clarify. Whatever Cassandra wanted to communicate now would either represent genuine growth or sophisticated manipulation designed for long-term results. I opened the email. "Dad, I know you said you'd contact me when you were ready, and I'm not trying to force that timeline. I'm writing because today marks exactly 1 year since you sold the house, and I wanted you to know how much has changed. Derek has been consistently employed for 8 months now, 2 jobs, as you probably heard through Emma's visit. We qualified for a modest apartment in a decent neighborhood, and the kids have adjusted to their new school. It's not the life we had before, but it's a life we're actually earning. I've been working as an administrative assistant at a dental office. The pay isn't much, but it's honest work. and I'm learning skills I never bothered to develop when I could depend on your support. Harold and Patricia found senior housing they can afford on their Social Security. They're healthier than they've been in years. Something about having to take care of themselves has given them purpose they didn't have when we were all living off your generosity. I won't insult you by saying this year has been easy. It's been the hardest year of our adult lives. But it's also been the most honest year. For the first time since Derek's business failures, we're living within our means, supporting ourselves, making our own decisions without depending on anyone else's charity. I understand now why you did what you did. You weren't abandoning us. You were forcing us to grow up. We'd become parasites without realizing it, confusing your kindness with our entitlement. Emma asks about you constantly. She keeps the postcards you've sent her on her bedroom wall like treasures. Jason still doesn't fully understand what happened, but he's proud that his mom and dad go to work every day like other parents. I'm not asking for anything, Dad. Not money, not reconciliation, not even forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your lesson worked. We learned what we needed to learn, even though it nearly broke us in the process. I hope your travels are everything you dreamed they'd be. You deserve happiness and adventure, and the freedom to make choices based on your own desires rather than other people's needs. If you ever decide you want contact with your grandchildren, they would be thrilled. If you decide we burned that bridge permanently, I understand that too. Either way, thank you for teaching us what independence actually costs. It was the most valuable and expensive education we've ever received. With respect and genuine gratitude, Cassandra P.S. Emma drew you a picture of the Eiffel Tower when she learned from your postcard that you were in Paris. I'm not sending it because I don't want to manipulate you with grandchildren, but she wanted you to know she made it. I closed the laptop and sat back in my cafe chair, watching pedestrians navigate the cobblestone streets of one of Europe's most beautiful cities. A year of distance had provided perspective that proximity had made impossible. Cassandra's email contained no requests, no subtle manipulations, no hints about financial difficulties or housing problems. For the first time in years, she'd communicated with me without wanting anything except to share information about their progress toward genuine independence. The postcard strategy had been my way of maintaining minimal contact with Emma and Jason without opening channels for adult manipulation. Each month, from whatever destination I was exploring, I'd send them postcards with age-appropriate stories about my adventures. It allowed them to know their grandfather was alive and well without creating opportunities for emotional blackmail. My phone contained 17 photos Emma had taken at her school's science fair, sent by Carmen Rodriguez, who'd become an intermediary for grandchildren communications. Emma's project had been about ocean coral reefs, inspired by my underwater photography from various diving destinations. The complicated mathematics of family relationships sometimes included variables that couldn't be eliminated without destroying the entire equation. I pulled out my phone and typed a brief response to Cassandra's email. Cassandra, your message demonstrates the growth I hoped education would produce. I'm genuinely proud of your family's progress toward self-sufficiency and personal responsibility. I'm not ready for direct contact with adults yet, but I never intended to punish children for their parents' mistakes. If Emma and Jason would like to video call their grandfather sometime, that could be arranged through Carmen Rodriguez. Continue focusing on your independence. It suits you better than dependency ever did. David P.S. Tell Emma I'd love to see her Eiffel Tower drawing. She can mail it to Carmen's address. I sent the email and returned to my memoir, adding a new chapter about the unexpected complexities of justified revenge when innocent parties were involved. The title I'd chosen seemed more appropriate than ever. The Mathematics of Justice, when family addition becomes family subtraction. Some equations couldn't be solved without changing fundamental variables. Some relationships couldn't be preserved without destroying the people within them. I'd subtracted myself from their comfortable arrangement and discovered that the remaining elements were stronger, more capable, and more genuine than anyone had imagined. The mathematics had worked exactly as calculated. Now it was time to plan my next adventure. Maybe Australia, where I could swim with sharks that were probably less dangerous than the family members I'd left behind in Florida. At 65, I was finally living the life I'd always wanted, making decisions based on my own dreams, rather than other people's assumptions about my limitations. The burden they'd planned to dispose of had disposed of them instead, and for the first time in years the equation balanced perfectly. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate justice and family karma, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of people who discovered that revenge truly is a dish best served cold. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to teach family members about the true cost of taking someone for granted? What would you have done in David's situation? And don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss another story about ordinary people taking extraordinary stands against those who underestimated them. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best lesson you can teach someone is what life looks like without you in it.